Hello, my siblings. This is Angela from Talks with God, and we are back with another open invitation for you to join the room as me and my sister friends just talk about life. I don't know about you, but I have been sitting with my feelings or in my feelings for the past few months. Ever since the pandemic began, I had this deep, unsettled feeling. Sometimes it'd feel overwhelmed, but most of the time it was like irritation and annoyance. And if you know me, that's just not my personality. But I couldn't put my finger on it. With each passing week, though, it became more and more clear the values of this country and the disparities between black and white folk were undeniable. And just when I felt like I couldn't take any more of hearing about my people die in mass numbers, the weirdest thing happened. White America seemed to have this awakening to to the issues of race in this country like never before. After the horrible death of George Floyd, may he rest in power. And you would think that my weary soul would have been relieved or satisfied or hopeful. And I keep seeing news, and you'd think that I would feel some side of like, okay. But if I'm honest, I still have this unsettled feeling, y'all. It's still there, it's in my gut. And as much as I have these conversations with so many of my friends around me that's illogical, that makes sense to think about how I might feel, at the end of the day, I have this deep intuitive suspicion that doesn't seem to make logical sense. And yet it's still there. And, when I've had these in my life before, I have learned that in moments when your mind does not connect with your gut or your intuition, it is the time where you be still, that you let your soul calm, and you sit with yourself until you can figure out what your gut is telling you, right? Intuition is a funky thing, I'll be honest. It's this esoteric, psychedelic term that people use, and you feel like, oh, that's really deep and that's cool, but we may not always know what people are saying when they say it. And it's honest, if I'm honest, it's rare that we even use it to make decisions ourselves. What's more common is we will Google things, we will text our friends, we'll read articles, we'll go to IG to see like what are other people saying and let that inform, what we may feel or think. We're a communal people, and that's not a bad thing. But how we perceive the world and the narratives that we allow to keep streaming in our minds, unfortunately, are like 97.8% a combination of everybody else's opinion, especially us Black women. We are socialized systemically to doubt ourselves, oftentimes encouraged to doubt ourselves. And unfortunately, this happens even in our faith. Whether it's well-intended implicit bias, parading or coming out actually as care and concern. You shouldn't buy that house until you have a nice man to do it with you, or you might need someone to go with you for that, just in case people try to, take you for your money, or just this idea that somehow you alone cannot make a decision or figure out to protect yourself in ways that you might need someone, right? Or it could be more explicit microaggressions from people of power, like, did you write this? Like, this is really good. What did you pull from? Like, are you citing who you need to cite when you write this? And you're just like, oh, did I write this? Or, baby, stop looking through my phone. I'm not doing nothing. Like, you always trying to think I'm doing something. Whew, been there. Or, are you sure you want to be a senior pastor? Like, you seem like a really good women's minister or a lead evangelist. Like, you just understand the Bible from the feminine text so well. All these things come out, and it perpetuates this kind of idea that there are some places you don't fit. There are some emotions that you shouldn't feel, or there are some emotions that you should feel. There's achievements that are made for you to achieve and you should achieve them, or there are achievements that you shouldn't achieve. But it's like how we present our authentic self when we bring it into the room. It's consistently met with this systemic agreed upon reaction to who we are. And at first you hear it and you're like, no, Ninja, like, you got off the phone too quick. That's not your mama. Let me see that phone, right? Or you might respond kind of like, nope, I do feel something. But over time, when it keeps happening, you might start saying, well, maybe I should be a women's minister, because after all, I see the Bible from a feminine text, and that makes sense that women would, receive that, as if no one else should hear the text from a feminist perspective, right? Or maybe I didn't come up with all that by myself, because, I had these talks with God and I read a lot. And so let me go make sure I did cite everyone. We start questioning our self-concept. We start questioning our gut and our authentic self, literally because everyone else, as opinions are running in our head. And as our intuition gets snuffed out and silenced and discredited, the thing that makes me so upset is that the exact imago Dei, or the image of God, that the creative spirit that God has put in us when we're our full selves, literally gets snuffed out and is unable to project itself in the world around us. More than ever, in this chaotic time when our lives are literally at risk from every angle, and the major decisions that are coming to us to make about our families, about our livelihood, all that is compounded on us as Black women, we need to hear our intuition. We need to know what it is. We need to protect what we hear. We need to honor what we're feeling in our gut, to live that out in our behavior. But what is intuition? What makes it different from just, our feeling or our anxiety, or or what other people taught us to think? How do we find this intuition? How do we know it's congruent with the spirit in us? All these things I'd love to share with you and tell you what I think. But you know what I've learned? That when I am in talks with God, I get a fuller word. And so I encourage you to come on through to our conversation where we think through these questions around intuition and how we access it and how we know it, and be with us in this conversation, and let's see what God might say.
Friends, welcome to our second Talk with God. We are what we like to call the Grown-Ass Women's Delegation. And if you've read our description and our commentary, we have been journeying together as friends, colleagues, contemporaries, sisters for the past 5 years, and found that whenever we would gather and have conversation, that there was a richness to what we had to say. Not that we are trying to be experts in any field, but just really feeling like what we said to one another helped to build each other up. And so we want to invite you into these conversations that we have whenever we release these conversations. One thing I do want to just say about us is that we didn't come together because we all agree on everything or that we do everything the same way. We find that what's beautiful about our relationship is that we're all committed to one another's flourishing, even if we live that out in various ways in our lives. And so we hope that as you listen to us, you will also make space in the ways in which we make space for one another, to maybe listen with gentle ears, to receive with gentle hearts, whatever it is that we are going to say today. So I'm going to introduce my fabulous sisters to you right now. We've got Dr. Margaret Antoinette Brunson, because I like to put respect on her name. We've got Reverend Dr. Donna Coltrane Battle, also respect on all of her names. Reverend Shalise Overy, and then our wonderful guide who's going to kind of help usher us through this conversation is my dear sister, Reverend Angela White Shields. I don't know why the devil is always trying to mess it up when I try to say your name. Anyway, but we're grateful for this group. And my name's Lisa Yaboa, and I am also a pastor.
The Reverend. Thank you. It is super excited today to talk about something that is just so meaningful in my own life, but also in Black women's life. One of the beautiful things about Black women is how we move by the unction of our intuition. Historically, you can see it in the midst of us, and are very keen to sensitivity to the spirit realm. And so because we as Black women exist at the intersection of so many different identities, of roles, of positions, right now what I'm hearing a lot is a lot of us are considering, what do we do? Where do we literally put our bodies? And how do we just be in this historic moment? And so I want to continue pulling from our ancestral medicine bag. And as we do that, also think about, what does it mean to lean into our own intuition and acknowledge the little power we have internally. And so I have some questions for us today as we talk about intuition. I'm so excited because I want to learn myself. Like, what do we think about this? The first question is just that Black culture is beautifully diverse and is rich and has an eclectic history of different traditions and beliefs and perspectives, similar to what you were talking about earlier, Lisa. So how would you describe intuition from your particular vantage point? And what are some ways that you've seen this intuition come up in our culture?
I'm not starting this time.
You're not starting, Lisa? I'll start. This is like a really exciting topic for me because it's something that I just like to talk about, and I also like to think about it and feel my way through it. But as I thought about this topic, I thought about Jill Scott's song "Rolling Hills," and she has a line in that song that starts out with, well, leads into intuition's something sweet, let you know what you know, let you find before you seek. And then she says, spirit of discernment, pray for it every day, let you know who should go and who you should let stay. And so I think, like, for me, yes, can we just moment of silence for Jill, for Auntie Jill? But like, that just always stands out to me, because I think intuition shows up as ways of knowing. I think because we spend so much time thinking about everything that we forsake other ways of knowing. And I think intuition is often very tangible and very visible if we pay attention. So like for me, it's getting chills on my arm, or I'll feel like a slight headache and restlessness when I know I should say a thing and I'm not saying it. Or I'll get that funny feeling in the pit of my stomach. Like all of that is intuition for me. And so I think like really understanding how it shows up for us is important. But like Jill said, it's also a spirit of discernment, you know, and I think when we seek to have a spirit of discernment, a stronger spirit of discernment, our intuition just shows up for us naturally. I think it's up to us to kind of pay attention to it.
Amen to that. The chills on the arm.
Yeah, so I would agree. I mean, I think that was the word that came up for me the most as I was sitting with this, is discernment. And this idea that we're, you know, when we talk about discernment, we're talking about our connection spiritually, our connection to the divine, our connection to life, like our life source, the very thing that's in us that lives and breathes, you know, that thing that can't be touched. Howard Thurman talks about this in his Meditations of the Heart, in the opening piece, you know, like there's an altar, there's an island, and on that island is an altar, and at that altar is a angel with a flaming sword, and nothing can get past that flaming sword unless it has your inner authority, the mark of your inner authority, right? Like there's something in us that's there, that's ours, that's given to us by something greater. And I think it is discernment, and I think it is collective wisdom. It is my experience. Like Angela, one of the things that you mentioned, and we may get into this a little bit, is this idea that we are also combating in our intuitiveness, this constant inundation and message that what we've experienced, who we are, what we know, our reality is not real or enough. And so we're combating that. And so it's creating this questioning that I believe we do have a deep-seated sense of wisdom that is within us, that is tapped into when we become still and when we engage in like these practices that help us, as Margaret would say, name how it shows up for us, and being able to distinguish between, you know, when this is intuition and when this is something else. But discernment and wisdom is it for me.
It's really interesting because I think that Hollywood in some ways loves to maybe sometimes caricature this deep knowing that we have as Black people, or at least try to like highlight it, although they don't name it as such. So I was thinking about the movie Harriet, and like these moments when Harriet Tubman, she has visions, and we know that of her, that she used to have these visions, or even that moment in the movie Selma when Martin Luther King stops on the Edmonds Pettus Bridge, and he's like, no, I'm going to invite everyone to kneel. Like there's this sense that even Hollywood recognizes that there is a way in which we move as a community. And so Angela, when you were talking about, you know, how do I define it, or how do I know it, you know, these t-shirts, trust Black women. Well, I trust myself. You know, to say to trust Black women is like Lisa has to like trust my own deep knowing that it's not about predictions. It's not about will there be a great outcome. It's this sense that like maybe there's something about my humanity, my connection to the divine, that we can just, we can actually trust. And so in Harriet Tubman's life, it shows up as a liberator. And Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, it's how to create a world where we do little harm to one another. I just think it's this deep knowing that maybe all of us can connect to in our lives.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, part of it is just about having a firm understanding of who I am, right? And being confident in what I already know about myself, what will work for me and what won't work, where I will be able to kind of operate with a greater level of impact. I think in just kind of moving throughout, I'm thinking about, one time, kind of career wise, where somebody said, okay, well, listen, if you want to do this, like, this is what you have to do. You got to make, 1,500 calls to somebody and, and do this, that, and the other. And I was like, oh, that won't work for me. Because like,
Right.
like I recognized it like very, very quickly, like, oh, like that's not how my life works. You know what I'm saying? Like with an overabundance of effort, the majority of which I know it's going to give me nothing, right? So the way my life works is to be sensitive to that spirit, to have that discernment, right, and find myself kind of running into things as I trust kind of myself, and not inserting myself in the places where people tell me I have to be, but being comfortable enough with myself to know, where I need to be, what my realm is, and then kind of just running in to what is next for me, by just kind of being in that place that I'm comfortable with because I know myself.
And Shalise, when you just said that, Donna might have mentioned this as well, there are just so many forces at play in the world that will tell us don't trust yourself. Like, because people are always mapping our bodies, and also even trying to map our discernment and map our minds and map our beauty. And so it's like continuously having to turn down the volume on those voices that tell you, actually, you need not trust yourself in this world. Or that you're not trustworthy in this world. So I think even for us to lean into our intuition is to live countercultural.
Yeah, I actually said that as one of my responses to one of Angela's questions that she's going to ask us. but yeah.
You must have intuited that.
I'm trying to wait. I'm trying to hold on because your questions are so good. I want you to lead us into it.
Okay. Well, I will lead into that. I will say, for me, when I thought about this, the only thing I could come up with was very technical, because my therapist said was like, your gut is literally your gut. Like, if you eat something wrong, your body gets queasy or you get shivers. And like the intuition for me is like this, it's a gut. And so when I take on media and my body's like, that didn't feel right. Or when people tell me how to be as a Black woman, I have symptoms. And I don't think it tells me the outcome. Like, I don't know what that fully means, but I just know something's not right. And so that's that pause moment, like, this ain't right. And then I have to sit, I guess. But for me, it's like a gut. Like, I actually have responses. That's why the shivers or the goosebumps made sense for me in that way.
Well, that's why they call the gut your second brain too, right? Because so many of our issues, like our gastrointestinal issues, are a result of like mental, emotional, spiritual. So they call the gut your second brain, and it does become an inner authority for you too. Like people who study, the chakras, who study like human design, will tell you, like, we all have an inner authority. And for some people, that sacral authority, like that guttural authority, becomes how you need to listen and respond and move in life.
That's so much there. I'll continue to talk about what in the therapeutic world we call a psychosomatic symptom, where your body shows the symptom as we go. But I just really appreciate that articulation. So with that, I'm thinking about those of us who are, I think about intuition as an evolving awareness. It is not something, it's something I think we come in as kids, but then like you said, it gets stripped away from us because of socialization. So for those of us who are kind of just starting, knowing like, I can't think my way through this moment, I need to feel, I need to intuit my way through it. Are there disciplines or practices that you all have engaged in that enhances your sensitivity or enhances your awareness, like intentionally, and maybe not intentionally, but afterwards you were just like, well, I felt something there that we could share?
For me, it really is just a matter of, so like when you when we experience those kind of psychosomatic indicators, right, to be able to allow myself the opportunity to just sit with it in a different realm, not in my mind or solely in my head, right? But so our practice is prayer, right? And one of the things that I do in prayer is just say, like, I mean, it's not hard, but say, like, okay, God, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, like, if, you know, like, give me some direction in this. Very simple, right? And then what I do is, like, I don't go looking then so much for that direction. I just keep my eyes open, right, to when it encounters me. So if I'm generally paying attention, I find that, you know, I notice something, you know what I'm saying, that like I usually wouldn't notice. And I'm saying, okay, and I just bank that in myself, you know, I ponder that in my heart for a while, let it stay there, right? But then I might notice something else connected, or then I might run into somebody who, you know, who says something, and I just feel like, you know, that's what it is. I mean, you know, like, I can't put it in, like, you know, 5 steps, but that's the way that it tends to work for me. So I guess the only practice that I can identify is one of general awareness, right? And not having this expectation that when I pray, like, for an answer, I'm going to find that answer, like, in church or in my Bible study time, you know, because I literally find it, like, in people. I find it when I'm driving down the highway, you know, I find it in you all and things that you say. So, you know, I find it in abundance of places. So being able to appreciate the sources that it comes from as I'm paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that mine is very similar to Shalice's. It is a form of like prayer meditation. It is a sitting with it, but it is also a radical openness and an intention to release conscious thought, right? So for me, it is the invitation of the Spirit and to just do, to be at work. Like, even the mystery of that even the mystery is at work, communicating with parts of me, and that it is often then being present, like being fully present. And it is a trusting, for me, it is a trusting, there's that word again, a trusting that there is an answer. And that there, and it is sometimes a resisting to the urgency. Like, sometimes things feel urgent, but they're often not. So it is a waiting, right? It is a, I know it's going to come. I just have to be willing and open to see it. So that practice of prayer and meditation is really about preparing myself for a sense of patience and for a sense of expectation, that I know it's already there. It's just about the unfolding of it. It's about the unveiling of it. And Margaret, you know, preached last month, you know, you already know. You know, you already know.
Right.
So it is that dual process of being still, prayer, meditation, but also a recommitment to being fully present, and the expectation that I already know is there. It's just a matter of when and how it will rise up.
Yeah, that's good. Lisa, did you want to jump in there, or you look like you were ready?
No, I'm gonna wait.
Okay. No, I was like, Donna, you and Shalice, I think you're pointing to like this posture, right? Like, intuition becomes a posture of attentiveness, openness to the Spirit, however the Spirit wants to present this, you know, itself. And for me, like, I really try to pay attention to everything. You know, some people have accused me, you know, me of being like too deep, right? Everything's not that deep, Margaret. Everything is not deep, but I find meaning in a lot of things, right? So like, if I'm constantly seeing the number 3 all the time, this happens to me all the time. I will pump gas. My gas will end up on 33.33 randomly, right? Go to the store, make a purchase. It comes up to $3.33, right? Or some combination of threes. And I'm like, this has to mean something. So then I'm like being attentive to that, to say like, okay, God, what is it that you're trying to say to me? Then I have to think about what are the things that I've been asking God for, or praying about, or trying to understand, or trying to discern on my own. I have to pay attention to those messages. You know, when you see signs and you see implications that God is near, like trying to hone in on what your thoughts are in that moment is attentiveness, because sometimes the answers come, but sometimes the answers are already there. It's like God wants to illumine us to those answers, but when we're so distracted and inattentive, God's like, oh my gosh, like the answer is right here. I need you to see it though. Like I need you to know. So, and I think another practice, and this is sort of unintentional, but something else I've practiced in the past is not following my intuition, right? Like that's something that has sharpened my intuition when I didn't follow it. And then I look back and see, I knew, like I had a feeling that wasn't the right thing, but I did it anyway. And so it's also like learning, you know, from your mistakes, quote unquote. I don't always think they're mistakes, but like one of the things I wrote in my book was it's not always the wrong way to something. Sometimes it's the long way, right? Like sometimes we take the long way. It's not that it's necessarily the wrong way. You just could have gotten there sooner had you been more attentive and trusted yourself. So I think I've learned to trust myself in moments where I didn't follow my intuition, and I'm learning to trust myself in those moments where I know God is showing up and God's like, trust yourself. Like, this is the right thing. I'm giving you the signs that like, yes, it's a go, move forward. I got your back.
So, whether you go to the left or the right, I will be behind you saying, this is the way.
Yes.
What's that phrase? Like something's the two sides of the same coin, same sides of the two coins. You know what I mean.
You had it right the first time.
Thank you, friends. See, I trust you all. I feel like my key practices are kind of one and the same. One is I get real quiet. I really do believe in quiet and solitude, which is so not my way is to be noisy in the world, is to make a lot of noise. But when I get quiet, oftentimes what I realize is that I realize how distracted I typically live, how distracted or how disassociated I typically live. And quiet helps me to answer the question. And it's one of my favorite passages of scripture. It's in John's gospel, in the first chapter. It says that these disciples are like walking behind Jesus, and Jesus turns around and asks them the question, what do you want? Or it can be translated, what are you looking for? And sometimes for me, that is the key question I have to keep coming back to in the midst of quiet. Lisa, what is it that you want? What are you looking for? Because if not, I will let a lot of other voices tell me, go here, do that. Maybe you should try this. You know, you're capable of that, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm called to it. So I would say quiet helps me to ask the question, okay, what do I want? Because Jesus first invited me to answer that question. So it's actually a holy question. It's not me being selfish. So quiet helps me to do that. The second would be, for me, prayer tends to be more vocal. So it's not that I'm not listening. I sometimes talk my way to my way. Yeah. I'm a think talker. I mean, I just I use my rollover minutes of words, friends. I have never come under the quota of my words. And sometimes I literally will talk, but I think it's almost like, you know, we say our words create worlds. I think I actually talk myself into, when you say you talk yourself into something, I actually talk myself into good somethings. That's and right. It's like it bubbles up. It's like a pot that's bubbling up and it just comes out of my mouth. So some of it is like when I have to get quiet, and some of it is actually when I have to get vocal, that are my practices. That I trust my voice. Like literally, I trust my voice.
Ooh, that speaks to me. I appreciate that. I'm a talk thinker too. I was just going to say that in the talk thinking, for me, I've learned my symptom or my thing to listen to is my emotions. I'm a linear, like intellect, cognitive, all the way. So emotions just weren't my thing. I was unaware of them. And then they showed up in my body, and my therapist told me pin them in my body. But now when I feel something, like I named, like this whole moment, I just feel unsettled. And instead of me trying to figure that unsettled out, I notice when I'm feeling angry or feeling peace or feeling, I've noticed the kind of the trail of emotions. At some point I'll figure out why I'm unsettled, but right now I'm just very aware of my emotions. And when they show up, that's an indicator for me if I can. And I think that was, I don't know if you were saying something, Margaret, because I think that was, okay.
You must have been reading my mind, but yeah, I was, yeah, if I say anything, it's going to take us down a whole nother path. So
Okay.
I'm not going to say
Take
it.
us to Margaret
That's
down
right.
another path.
That's right.
Angela, that was your intuition at work.
It was.
I feel a word coming.
Okay, I'll say it.
Yes.
I'll say it.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you.
Come on, Bishop.
You know, I can relate to like the emotions not kind of not being my thing, but I think what I've realized too is that there's some value for me. There has been some value in not always giving into my emotions, right? Because I think, especially as Black women, we carry a lot of emotions, and some of those emotions we carry don't belong to us. Right? Like we're carrying emotions for other people, doing their emotional work, carrying their emotional labor. And some of those emotions we need to release and give back, right? We don't even need to take those emotions on. But at the same time, our emotions also are a source of strength for us when we can place them in the context of like our spirit, our mentality, our psychological state and well-being, and then emotions all connected to that. But I think sometimes it can be really challenging to sift and sort through that, which is why I think this conversation is so important, because there are times where our emotions inform us, and then there are also times when our emotions lie to us. Yeah, like our emotions don't tell us the truth, at least not the capital T truth, right? Like there's truth in the moment. That's how we feel. We should honor it. But maybe that's not like what's really happening and what's really going on. So I don't know. It's just something I think about a lot in terms of emotions and how we manage it and how we put emotions in perspective.
That's real. When you said that, I thought about like our emotion itself could very well be in response to an untruth, so it makes it untrue. Like the emotion might feel right, but you're getting angry.
There we go.
You know, and how many times have I done that recently? But how many times do we think something's happening and we respond, and we're unable to see? That's why I like what you mentioned, Shalise. Like you kind of, all of us, everybody said you kind of wait, you just kind of let the word linger, so you don't make a post, which eventually the post may come, but you let the thing form over some time, which kind of is a great segue to some of the things we, I guess, avoid or do to protect our intuition. I talk a lot. I'm an athlete at heart, and defense wins games. I don't care what nobody says. And so there's like, man, that's right. It doesn't mean we're negative. It doesn't mean we only think about being attacked and always strategize the worst thing. But if you're an athlete, defense is how you essentially gain ground, honestly, so that when you do, strike an offensive moment, you're keeping that the fruit. You're protecting that fruit that comes. And so I want to think about what are some things that stifle our intuition, or the things that we should avoid to keep our boundaries when we find something. Go ahead, Bishop.
I got a lot to say. I'm just trying to wait on my sisters.
No, say it, Margaret.
So, I was watching, so Dave Chappelle won an award recently, or I guess it was maybe last year. And so they aired the award show on Netflix. And I think it was Sarah Silverman who came on stage, and all of these people were kind of like either roasting or celebrating him. And she said something that just made me fall out on the floor, y'all. It was so subtle, but she said something to the extent of like, I don't know how to feel about this. I haven't checked Twitter yet. Right? Like she said, and that was, y'all, it was so subtle, but wow, full of meaning. Like how often do we check with other people to know what we should do instead of like going into ourselves first and trying to figure out, like Lisa said, what do you want, right? Like what do you think? How do you feel? And I think one of the biggest barriers in this time period is social media, right? Like social media is such a powerful tool, But the thing with power is like it's wielded in different ways depending on who's using it. And so if you're looking for answers all the time and you have like this inclination to always ask other people what they think, or you don't trust yourself, you haven't learned to trust yourself, social media actually becomes a crutch that keeps you from being able to like sharpen your intuition and trust yourself fully. So always having to check in and see, like people even saying recently people use the term like tone deaf. You don't want to be tone deaf to what's going on in the world. And that may be true, but like there are other messages that God might want to speak right now too, right? Like maybe there's a different tone or a different message. So like we have to try.
Yeah, you talking
I
good.
know, I love this topic. But yeah, like I think that's one of the biggest barriers to knowing yourself, for one, which Shalice pointed to is like kind of the foundation of this. Knowing yourself and also trusting yourself. You can't do that. You can't always do that like when other people are telling you who you are and what you should think and what you should be. So I try to stay away from all of that.
I piggyback on that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm gonna piggyback after you. You go ahead.
Okay, it's quick. I'm a talk thinker, and that is how I've lived. And more recently, no joke, God was like, stop calling your friends, don't talk about nothing, write. And that's very hard for me. And so I've been writing, and so much is coming out of the writing because it's not, with other people. So this idea of like seasons, even for those of us who check in as part of our strength, there are moments where it's like, like right now you have to go into the ancestral space and check in with that cloud of witnesses in that way. And so go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I think that is first. And actually this group, I think helped me name this as I've been going through this process around social media. I'm not a big social media person, but it's just because for me, it just takes up too much energy. I have so much invested engagement in people that I don't have a lot of energy for engaging mass numbers of people. Because for me, I always feel energy from social media. And so I have to, like so much is being put out there that I have to pull back. But I'm also, I've been struggling with, as you all know, like not necessarily self-promotion, but how self-promotion has been portrayed and how that plays in social media. And Lisa said something to me that I believe connects very strongly to this idea of being able to check in with yourself before you kind of go outward, come inward before you go outward. And she said that there's a delineation, there's a difference between validation and affirmation, right? So this isn't like exactly Pastor Lisa. This ain't me, y'all. This Pastor Lisa. So like this idea that we have to be mindful of when we need validation, outward validation, as opposed to affirmation, which is what the role of community is. None of us, like if any of us need validation outside of ourselves for our personhood, for our identity, for our worth, for our value, we will never be able to get it. It's like cocaine. It's like it's crack cocaine. We always need someone telling us you're valid, you're validated. No, nothing about our identity, our self-worth, and our value can be based outwardly outside of the divine in ourselves. And so when we start to move to a place where we cannot come inward first and still ourselves and sit with it, right? Like people always bringing opportunities to me, and sometimes I'll just be like, I'll sit with it. Even ones that I'm like readily get ready to say, no, I know I don't want to do that. One of my mentors started me early. No, just stop and say, let me sit with it. Don't immediately say no. Don't immediately say yes. Just sit with it, so that there is this process of coming inward. And then after I've done my inward work, then I go outward for affirmation that I haven't missed something in my blind spots with the people I know me and who trust me. But it's not about validation. It's about affirmation. And so there are two different things at work that I think is at play when we start to think about distractions to intuition.
Yeah.
Dog.
Oh.
Yeah. Run a lap.
That's right.
Somebody. Take a lap around the living room right now.
That's real. That's real.
Mine is a private. This is kind of a personal thing. I think one of the major things I have to fight against is, and this kind of comes out of a confession, but most of my life I have been inundated with like respectability politics.
Ooh.
And being socially appropriate, and that needs to be your major survival mechanism. And I think especially in a season like this where we're in an inflection point in history, I have to reckon with the fact that a lot of my life has been, how can you be the good Black, you know? And so I think for me right now, and I'll talk about this, I think Angela has one more question, but a little bit more about who I've been trusting in, and how I know how to trust my intuition. But for me, it's, I can no longer listen to dominant culture first. Like so much of my life was like, first see what they think, and then see how you can shape shift your life around that. And what it started to do is mute my own sensibilities. I was always like, okay, but if I say that, then I know that these folks are going to hear it in a particular way. So for me, a new boundary is I cannot first pick up the master's tools. And I have learned, this is again, out of a confessional nature, friends. Most of my life was, Lisa, learn how to wield the master's tools in like beautiful ways. Wear a tulle skirt while you're doing it, but use the master's tools. And so I'm also going through my own, at 43 years of age, probably starting around age 38, a real shift around. I have leaned in way too hard to people who were telling me who I needed to be.
Girl.
Yes.
Girl, we got to pause.
Thank you, friends. Thank you all. Thank you.
Go ahead, Shalice.
Oh no, I was just gonna talk, we've been naming like those who we are playing defense like against. So whether it's like social media, whether it's the dominant culture, and I just want to name one more. It's connected to the dominant culture, because a lot of times when we feel our intuition, when we notice things, Margaret, when you notice that number, you know what we'll do? We'll go and ask our pastors who are predominantly male, and we miss then the opportunity to learn from our own wisdom. And so if God is giving you the clues, right, why would not God also give you the answer, right? And so one of my defensive tool is to not ask people who don't know me like that, and I've been able to develop that, right, because I also happen to be a pastor, so I know if you don't know me, you don't necessarily know the answer. Now, if I feel like you might have some insight on this particular issue, then I will ask you, right? And then if you give me your unsolicited opinion, I also know how to be able to sit with it, and then be like, oh no, you don't know what you're talking about, right? So other people have to be able to cultivate that within themselves too, and not go ahead and ask the authority because they have a very one-sided view, which means they don't know what they're talking about. Not all the time.
Can we just sit right here? Because here's the reality. There's a lot of forces that are anti-Black women's intuition. But the hardest one for us to name is Eurocentric white Christianity that comes through oftentimes our pastors that are not necessarily white all the time. And sometimes even women at the time. And so like it's this nuance. And what you name for me is the pattern. Not that asking a pastor is bad, right? We're pastors, like people ask me stuff all the time. But even I know, like you said, I can give you my opinion, but my theological belief is that the word of God comes through all of us, and when we collectively share, we get the fullness of the word. That's why I come to God. I'm like, hey guys, what do you think on intuition? I have great stuff about intuition, but I'm going to get more great stuff through for other people. And the history of clergydom or churchdom, unfortunately, was not really crafted out by African culture, right? By our culture. It was crafted out by a hierarchy where there's one person that is, related to God and mediates between God and us. Well, if you're like us, and you believe the Spirit moves, then that that veil was broke, right? And so the pastor now becomes a multiple of voices that mediate. And we do, we respect them because they're trained. We went to school for this. We know scriptures like the back of our hands. So there is an authority in the sense of awareness. But when it comes to like, when I hear my pastor's dope, and he'll tell me stuff, my symptom will still go like, that's not for me. Like that's for other people. Real quick, I'm sorry, I'm on a tangent. My church right now is predominantly white, and it's a beautiful space, and I'm there for a particular reason, and we all know why, right? When there are messages that come from the pulpit, there are times where I'm like, that message is for white people.
Mm-hmm.
It is not for me. And I think it's beautiful. But what is God saying to me, because I'm not on that side of privilege, right? And I can tell my pastor this is why I love him. So there's moments where I actually deflect even the word, or not deflect, but I go, that's great, God. Now where's my word after Sunday, right? So tangent, but it's a pain point for me and an emotional point, in that God can speak through all of us.
Yes.
So yeah, go ahead.
That's good.
That's good. That's good.
I'm gonna take notes after this.
Yeah. I know when I watch it again.
When I watch this again.
If there's others, this idea of what stifles us, but also moving into like the last question is kind of what helps us maintain confidence. You know, what actually keeps us being like, nope, that's a symptom. I'm listening to that, and affirms that our intuition is leading us in that moment.
I'm gonna say this really quickly. 2 things. One is trying it, right? So Margaret said, not listening to your intuition is a way that you can cultivate it, because I messed up. Like, okay, that wasn't it, and so. But so yeah, like actually just like walking into it, like that's the only way. You gotta taste and see. But the other one that came from me, I just want to give my mama some credit, Lucretia Grady. My mother helped develop it in me, and so that's why I know it's possible. And so me as a pastor, like I feel responsibility to help develop that in other people. So to be like, I can help you walk this journey, but I can't necessarily tell you the answer because, I'm not sure. Sometimes I think I might know, and those times I might tell you, but like you got to be able to figure this thing out for yourself. So my mom cultivated in me. Like I would ask my mom, when I was getting ready for school, like in high school, and maybe, I had made a fashion choice that like I felt like good about, my intuition said it was cool, it was different, but I wasn't sure, and I wasn't trying to get like ridiculed the whole day, stand out somewhat, but not completely. And so I would say, Mom, how does this look? And she would say, without missing a beat, how does it look to you? I don't have to wear it. And so that is a way that she like just cultivated in me, saying like, you don't have to check in with anybody. If you were satisfied in yourself, like right. you don't have to check in with me. And it also reminded me, right, that we can dress ourselves in the clothing of the dominant culture, but nobody has to wear it but us. Nobody has to bear the burden of us walking inauthentically but us. So I want to give credit where credit is due to Lucretia and Grady for helping cultivate that in me.
Right.
Yes, Lord. Yes.
I'm not about to injure my Mac, but I was gonna throw something back to Lisa.
Yeah, those things that's too expensive,
Lisa.
You gotta control yourself.
No, that's good, Shalise. That's good. That's good. I think Mama Lucretia and my Mama Doris from the same school. My mom was always like, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. What do you think? And I'm like, I don't know. I think for me, one of the things that strengthens my ability to kind of keep trusting myself is also like honoring my humanity in similar ways to Lisa, how respectability, we end up trying to acquiesce to certain ways of being because of the dominant culture. I think also the dominant culture tricks us and lies to us that we have to always have the answer, and that to have the answer, we also have to have the right answer, and that there's a perfect way to do a thing, and that perfect way is the only way. And that spirit of like perfectionism and getting everything right is definitely on brand for white supremacy. Like it's part of the brand, right? And so even to reject that notion that everything has to be right all the time is actually to honor your humanity, because there are so many things about being human that will never get all the way right, quote unquote, right? Like we get to define. The reason why I love qualitative research is because sure, the numbers say this, but how do we make sense of the numbers? How do we make sense of the data? How do you make sense of your life and your life experience? how do you make meaning of it? And all of us, that's a different journey for each and every one of us. So that's also one of the reasons why I hate this culture around, you know, if one person is doing something that looks similar to what you do, then that means I can't, you know, I can't jump out here and do it also because there's too many people doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that makes no sense because each one of us ascribes our own meaning to whatever we're doing, which means the delivery will be different, which means the impact will be different, which means that different folks, it will resonate differently with different people. And so there's never a right time, there's never a right way. And part of, like, you know, even surrendering to that idea is to honor your humanity, because in our humanness, we're gonna mess up. We're gonna do things that don't always make sense, you know, 5 or 10 years from now. But like Shalice said, we try, right? Like we trust ourselves, and I personally also trust God to have my back. Like I've been able to look back and see, like, Margaret, that wasn't the best thing, but because of my faith, the way my faith is set up,
Yes.
I know God was like, let me go ahead and like help her out, because Potiti, she didn't know what she didn't know. But now that I know, I can do something different, right? So, like, I don't know. It's just, yeah, we're human. And that, to me, that's what grace is. Like, I have to show myself grace as well. You know, we show other people grace, especially Black women. We give everybody the benefit of the doubt sometimes. And it's so difficult for us to turn that on ourselves and be gracious to ourselves. And we beat ourselves up over these things that really are part of our life's journey. And we're learning. We're still learning. Like, I'm almost 40, and there are lots of things I still don't know. But I have to maintain a posture of, like, openness and learning, and be able to pivot and shift and change and not get stuck, because when we get stuck, our intuition also begins to, like, dwindle, or we lose trust in ourselves because we're not moving. We're just stuck.
So yeah, I would say, again, connected to what Margaret is saying, you know, like, I hear elements of the strong Black woman, you know, this woman who almost has to be perfect in order to be loved and supported in many ways. And the way that I most honor one of the methods or practices that I have that really upholds my intuition and helps me to honor my humanity is intimacy. It is a deepening intimacy with myself, specifically with myself and with God, because in intimacy, there is one risk, of course, that's what it means to be intimate, but there's also a trust building, and there is a deepening of love, like this healthy, robust love. And I just think about the people that you're most intimate with. Like, you're going to be more likely to give them grace. You're going to be more likely to allow them room to move, to forgive them, but to also to affirm them and to push them up. And I think cultivating, for me, this intimacy with myself, like being in love with the parts of me and who I am, gives me the space, but also deepening that intimacy with God, so that I'm also trusting. Like, I've discovered on an ongoing basis pockets and spaces where I don't trust God. Like, there are ways that I haven't. And so, like, how do I lean into those in ways that may feel risky to me, but those are the very spaces that I need in order to affirm my value, to affirm my security, like to give me a sense of security. And when I have a sense of security, I don't feel the need to be perfect, because I know that what I feel is at stake when I'm insecure really isn't at stake. Like, my value and worth is not at stake. My identity is not at stake. How much I am loved is not at stake. But if that is at stake, either consciously or unconsciously, it's going to constantly move us away from these intuitive spaces. And it's not going to give us room to not always get it, quote unquote, perfect or right. So for me, it is a constant intimacy. It is a deepening of love in a way that creates not just vulnerability, but a sense of strong security.
Amen.
You know, I know for me that I'm what they call an Enneagram 9, and we live on what's called the gut triad. And so literally my gut is how I should like lead out in the world. And so, yes, I am learning how to trust myself. I mean, that is really, truly a practice that has kind of come about, I would say more aggressively from like age 38 to now age 43. I think beforehand, I was just trying so hard to be everybody's everybody, and that just was not working for me. It was making me very exhausted. So I think people are now getting to bump into the real Lisa, and that feels very free for me to trust myself and to know that people can trust loving me as I really am. But I also think there's Angela, as you asked the question about how am I like strengthening it, is also a collective. I'm like, I don't like to do anything beyond community. I am not let's just do it by myself kind of. And I would say that this group has been for me like the Quaker Clearness Committee. You all have truly helped me help myself. And for two reasons. One, Shalise talked about you're not going to go to people who don't know you. Well, you know me. And so there is that level of like intimacy, but also two, you let me be me. Because there are some times that people want me to be made in their image. And so anything I say to them, they're going to want, ultimately they want me to be a mini them, and you all don't make me try to be a mini you. And so I think part of my strengthening is one, being with people who know me, but also two, being with people who let me be me. I'm grateful for you all. I think the other part is, Margaret talked about sometimes when you realize where we've not always like, where maybe we've made some mistakes. Because I'm also learning how to rehearse God's goodness, is like a term that Eugene Peterson uses in the Message, like to go back and think through all the times when I trusted my intuition and I did not do myself harm, and God did not do harm. God doesn't wring God's hands when I make decisions. And I need to sometimes go back and remind myself of those times that I didn't actually blow it all up by trusting in the Spirit.
I appreciate you, sis, because I think so much when I heard you talk, what comes up for me is all the stuff I've digested that doesn't allow me to do that, to be different or to mess up. I think about like shame, just like legitimate shame, or the ability to control my image, make sure my edges are straight, and all these things to portray something. And I know it's because we have to survive, right? We have to survive the hierarchy structures of what is normal and what is, for a lot of reasons. But something you bring up for me is just like, but the Spirit is freedom, right? And it takes like real faith. I know James Cone was like, when you really start lifting up Blackness, that which we push down, the non-norm things, you'll learn a real God, and you'll need a real God real quick, because the principalities will go, wait a second, somebody is literally not conforming. That's not, then the insecurity in them rise up, so they pull you down. And so the more I try to like let my hair out, right, I get pushback. You literally do, and you try to survive it. But now it's like I have a faith that I will be okay, right? If I mess up, that's cool. Like I work out my salvation in fear and trembling, because I ain't gonna get it right. So with all that to say, one thing I do tell myself is that I actually am an illumination of God's artistic skill on earth. Like I actually am an illumination of God's artistic skill. Like I am just like, God was just in the room, just making some art, like, oh, this one's nice. She likes green, and she's a linebacker, and she's goofy as hell. And then I go out into the world and I start taking that stuff off. And no, I'm supposed to be all those things that don't fit in, to illuminate God's artistic skill. And that has been my life. When I walk in a room, am I illuminating the peace of God that I'm supposed to right now? Because the world needs us, even though they reject it, so something I tell myself.
So one thing you said, Angela, that I think is worthy of mentioning is also the understanding that when we begin to operate in this way in the world, that there will, that there's to expect pushback, but to understand the framing of that pushback, that in dominant culture, if you have been given more than your share for so long, what actually feels like what is actually mercy can feel like injustice. right? And so for those
Write
who
that down right now.
So for those who haven't been able, those of us like Black women and other women of color who honestly have been told to take up less space but do more work, right? When we begin to say no, we can take up the fullness of our space because we too are created in the image, and this earth is our Lord's too, right? So when we begin to unapologetically take up that space, the pushback may be, it feels like, oh, we're infringing on someone else's territory, right? And I think that it's important for us to be able to see that and name it and ignore it. That no, what you are naming as injustice is actually mercy, because when I take up my full space and you are less greedy in how much space you take up, I'm actually also working out your salvation for you.
Girl.
Thank you. Thank you for
saying
saving me.
Will the usher service at the doors?
Can we pass the plate?
I need someone to put one of them sheets on me.
Yes. Somebody done fell out for
showing.
sure.
That's resistance. That's resistance. That's
Oh gosh, I'm getting hot.
Yeah.
Really close.
Good.
All minds clear.
Our hearts and minds are clear. Now I really want to sing a song.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm the hype. I like being the hype woman.
Thank you, song, Lisa.
Go.
No, I'm gonna the next episode.
Okay.
Well, and what, like, so much has been said, right? And if there's something else comes up, keep going. I don't want to quench the spirit. I just want to lift up some of the themes that this idea of that this is resistance, y'all. Like, listening to our intuition is some of the work. Those of us we're not like, what do I do to fight racial justice? And like, do I go out? Do I not? Like, part of that is actually being fully you in every space you're in. That will be met with resistance, and you keep doing it. And what do you need? Community, right? To keep that going. Other things I've heard, and please, chime in the things that stand out to you all, because I think the wrapping up articulation is important, is this idea that your intuition is God-given, right? It's not wrong. It's not wrong to be like, this doesn't feel right, when they tell you like you're wrong for feeling that. And so other things that might stood out to you that you might walk away with.
I think just one thing is, I would never, I talked about in the beginning about how Hollywood likes to maybe caricature the intuition of Black people, but I don't want to exoticize our intuition. I want to humanize it. That maybe, just maybe, part of what I'm living into is me being fully human, which then can be a model to anyone, that maybe you can also tap into something to be fully human. And I think, and we may talk about this on another episode, but part of being fully human is not being dissonant, and is and being congruent, like really like the head and the heart being married to your hands and your feet. And so I don't want to exoticize, like, oh, there's like, it's like, no, like this is right sizing and humanizing this God-given gift that I have been given, but I'm choosing to leverage, which I would hope would encourage other people to say, what's this God-given gift that I've been given that I also need to leverage in this world?
That's good. I appreciate that, because I'll say real quick, it's not that we're somehow different in that way, but because of suppression or different ways of oppression, maybe we have leaned into it differently. And so the starting point of what it would feel like to be a Black woman, to think about intuition, others can have that experience. It's the levels of the ways in which we got digested or inherited, internalized some of the oppression might be different. So I appreciate that.
I think the thing that stands out to me and stood out to me in this conversation too is, this recognition that our intuition is within us and it is with us, and yet it's still our responsibility to be attentive to it, right? So like, it's not just something that happens in this passive way, even though we're always getting messages, we're always hearing, we're always seeing, but paying attention is our responsibility. Like listening and actually, being attentive and being aware of what's happening around us is always our responsibility, because I think, you know, we often miss opportunities to do something different because we're just not, our posture is so often one of distraction and not one of like being attentive. So that stood out to me a lot in this conversation. And I'm also grateful for y'all.
Amen.
Boy, the way I'm gonna clutch y'all after this pandemic. Woo! My
Yes,
God.
Lord.
That's right. Here we meet. That's in my head.
So a theme for me that I think maybe wasn't named in this way, but that I see and hear is leaning into the exploration and the curiosity of it. You know, that what comes to mind is, you know, knock and the door will be open, you know, seek and you shall find. Like it is also about an exploring of it and a curiosity that we have the freedom to do. Like we actually to tell yourself, I actually have the time and the space and the freedom to invest in what is in me in this way. You know, that I don't, you know, I can make room and I can make space, and that I'm worthy of exploring with God, and, you know, when it's appropriate, others in this way, so that there is this exploration and this curiosity that actually creates wonder and creates excitement and creates a sense of joy around discovery. You know, that there's this constant piece of even discovering parts of you that are already in you as you are building and growing and evolving spiritually as a human.
Y'all have said it all. I have nothing to add.
We're grateful for this time. I'm always grateful for you all coming just genuine, and that I know you love me, right? You love who I am and who I will be. And so we're hoping that those of you who are watching will feel that we also love who you are, and we'll be sending out tips on how to walk with God coming up soon, on just some things, right, to hold on to as we try to do this journey. It is a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. And so we're grateful for you all joining. And to my sisters, like always, this is just a blessing into my soul,
Love y'all.
Love you. Love y'all.
Much love.